All right, everybody, welcome back into the Inside Edge podcast. Today, as you can see, we are joined by our usual coach, Joe Clark, myself, and a special guest today. We have Kevin Woodley. How's it going, Kevin?
It's going good. Thanks for having me on, guys. Good to meet you, Gehrig, and good to see you again, Joe.
Good to see you, Kev.
Kevin Woodley is a longtime writer and a lover of the game of hockey and specifically goaltending. So we have him here today to talk goalie breakdowns, little things you can take from video from professionals all the way down to just eating rubber in your driveway. So really, really quickly, though, before we get in, I saw a post about the Seattle Mariners on your page when I was doing some research. How do we feel? Do we feel good about last night? Finally getting a postseason victory.
We feel a little better about last night after the first one. So yeah, we're breathing a little sigh of relief after last night. And as anybody who watched it saw, like, that's a city. Obviously, I'm 2.5 hours north in Vancouver, but I grew up playing ball south of the border in a little town called Bellingham. Joe Martin Stadium, which for the longest time was also the single A home of the Mariners, and I grew up sort of playing American Legion ball up and down sort of northern Washington State, and became a huge Mariners fan. So I grew up with Buhner and Griffey, and even though the Kingdom sucked, grew up sort of watching them there. And even though as a Canadian I'm supposed to be cheering for the Blue Jays, like I bleed Mariners blue. So that was a nice one last night and a long time coming.
That's some honesty. I appreciate it. So in a similar vein, how did we fall in love with the game of hockey as a kid?
Well, there's a two-parter here, and one's a longer story. I'll give you an abbreviated version of the longer story that led me to the shorter story. Did not play hockey as a kid. Baseball was actually my first love.
Same here.
And I played it as long as I could. Ended up going to school not for baseball because I screwed up my shoulder. So I ended up just going to school for school. And after a few years of not loving it, I was 3.5 years into a stats and computer science degree and taking actuarial exams. I had what's that line in Jerry Maguire? Breakdown, breakthrough, Joe? We'll call it a breakthrough.
Yep.
Quit school, worked for a while, and then I drove to every major league ballpark in the States and lived in my car for 3 months. And along the way in Chicago, I met a guy who covered the Cubs, and this light bulb went off in my head, and it was like, you can watch sports, write about it, and make a living. And I actually applied for journalism school from the couch of a frat house I was sleeping on while I was at Wrigley Field. And actually up in my office, like, as much as behind me you've got the goalie wall, Carey Price jersey, Henrik Lundqvist jersey, Roberto Luongo, all Olympic jerseys. Hidden off in the corner is my old life as a baseball fan. There is a Ferguson Jenkins signed baseball because I met him coming out of Wrigley Field and explained what I was doing, driving to all the ballparks. You could do that in 95. You could live in your car and not get killed driving around to all the ballparks in the United States. And I took him for a beer, and he signed a baseball and went for a beer kitty corner to Wrigley. So that's how awesome. That's how I became a journalist, which leads us to how I became a goalie guy. Was Ian Clark was the goalie coach for the Vancouver Canucks. I would argue one of the top goalie coaches in the game, and just a long history of producing great goalies, and nobody's written more about the position. He had a goalie magazine, and he hired me to edit it. And so now I'm editing all this like just prolific amounts of writing and learning the position at a real like grassroots. Like, he starts with all the basics, and he doesn't just tell you to do it, he tells you why to do it. And so my job was to simplify that writing, and I learned in the process. And what it did was, as a journalist, it opened up a whole new language. Goalies, all of a sudden, at a time when nobody else was doing it, I was speaking to goalies in their terms, in their language. And that allowed me to open up relationships with these guys that, beyond what you normally have. Like, just allowed me to start building something, with a lot of the guys kind of special. And so that led to me sort of being like, I gotta try this. I gotta do this. Now, thankfully, I was a middle infielder, so there are some similarities between trying to get in the way of things, balls, rubber. And so I started playing, and I fell in love with every part of the position of goaltending. Like, the fact that there's no one way to do it, the fact you can break it down technically, but then you have to go outside of the technique. Like, there's just so much about this position and it's ever changing. it never stops evolving. So that's the long-winded way of how I got to here.
Was that the first? How old were you, Kevin? The first time you put on goalie pads?
35,
That's
30.
unbelievable.
That's awesome.
Yeah, 35, and by 40, I was taking part in a skate that has a handful of ex-pros and NHLers, and just having that technical foundation allowed me to get in the way. Now, I may be one of these teeth in my might be fake from one of those ex-NHLers getting a hold of one right through the mask and knocking it out, but man, I love it, and thanks to all that writing and reading and editing, I was able to survive at a higher level than I should have starting at that age.
That's a badge of honor, though, to get a tooth knocked out, especially playing so late.
Well, it was a badge of honor to a certain degree, but my wife and kids didn't love the look, so we had to get it fixed permanently.
Yeah. You got to get it fixed nowadays. It's not what it used to be. When you initially started that story, I was thinking, yeah, I started playing late too. I picked up goalie pads when I was 17, but yeah, that's a little bit later. That's awesome, though.
Yeah, and now I'm 52 and my hips hurt like crazy already.
I mean, the position is demanding on parts of your body you do not use otherwise. I learned that coming back to play beer league for the first time like 7 years after I had put on pads.
Listen, if you've had a break and the hips are barking after getting back, Gehrig, we've got something at Ingold that'll help you get through that. It's this great little sort of active release thing that it basically frees up the hip joint. I actually haven't had a lower body injury since we learned it.
Okay. Good to know. We'll get to that at some point, I hope. The next question I had was just how did you and Coach Clark get to know each other?
Through Net 360, which is a camp up in Kelowna, right, Joe? That was the first time. He was up there with Connor Hellebuck, and we were up there as sort of guests to gather content. For the guys that run it, Alpha Hockey Agency, Ray Petkow and Adam Francilia, and the training he does, I think allowing us to be there sort of for us was great from a content perspective, but also, help build their profile a little bit as well in terms of our audience and my audience working for NHL.com as well. Like I was there as in goal, but also a camp as unique as that attracts the interest of, the NHL.com, and that's a bigger sort of platform as well in terms of the mainstream. So I think everybody benefited from it, but most of all from the relationships we got to build, not just with the goalies, but with guys like Joe, who were a big part of their lives.
Yeah. I remember the first time getting on the ice in Kelowna, and you and your boys were setting up cameras all over. You were just documenting everything that we did, and we just hit it off right away. I mean, Kevin fit right in. He fit in with all of us, and then it even went a level further when we get on the golf course together. And
once I saw him hit driver off the deck, I was like, "Oh, this guy's the best."
Yeah, I used to be able to do that, but it was the times in Kelowna was such an amazing group of people and great times, and but Kevin is as much of part of it as anyone, and but yeah, we all hit it off. Ray Petko, a very dear friend, as is Adam Francilia, were the guys that really ran it all and paid for it all, and it was just a really neat package, very very as Kevin said, very unique, extremely unique, and and this was before Connor Hellebuck was a 3-time Vezina winner and a Hart Trophy winner and all that.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Watched him grow. Everyone kind of grew together.
And that was the beauty of that camp, is it was like a think tank at the time, right?
Yep.
Like especially in the early years, it evolved away from that a little bit in the latter years. It's not running right now, but in the early years, especially, like you had a whole bunch of goalie people from both the coaching and the on ice side, just sharing ideas, philosophies, and trying new things, right? Tools in the toolbox, right, Joe? Like all these different elements.
100%. I think had COVID not happened, I really believe we would still be going there every first week of August or whenever second week of August. But it allowed us to meet some great goalie people. Wade Flaherty, who I knew a little bit before anyway, but there were some really really good goalie people that were there, part of the camp. Goalie coaches, junior goalie coaches, some pro guys, but a really, really neat mix. You know what? Everything you do on the ice as a goalie is a gamble. There's no guarantee it's gonna work, and you just get varying opinions on how to handle situations, and that's really the best way to put it. But talking to so many different types of people, including yourself, Kevin, because we all respect, what you know about the game and the position. And I didn't know that you never played. As a kid growing up, I never knew, and didn't have a clue. It didn't even matter.
So sort of, we were talking about like the tools of the trade for goalies a little bit ago, and as someone who's been writing about this game for a long time, I think a lot of what people talk about in the background of hockey now is those, and a lot of what we talk about on this podcast is drills and things that you can do on your own time to get better and fine tune and sharpen these little things you're talking about that coach has talked about that have to almost be unconscious when you get to this next level for whoever that is, whether you're in high school or playing in a pro league somewhere else. What are some of the best and worst things you've seen in your time covering hockey in terms of the new generation versus when you started writing?
Oh man, like this is year 26 covering the NHL for me. Again, showing my age. It's funny, like when I started, and this is sort of the constant evolution of goaltending. When I started, I was learning about things like proper leg recovery, which for you, Gehrig, like would have been one of the first things you learned, right? Like if you need to go left from a butterfly, you lift your right leg, right? When I started I think it was 03, 04 with Ian Clark sort of learning these things, there were NHLers, and I mean guys that are or should be in the Hall of Fame, right? Like Curtis Joseph, right to the end of his career, had a dominant leg that he got up with versus a proper leg, get up with your right to move left and left to move right, that kind of thing. And these guys, like so much of this technical sort of breakdown efficiencies that we see as just like absolutes in today's game were new to these guys. And yet at the same time, here I'm in this world where I'm learning it, and then I'm going to these goalie schools with like 12 and 13-year-olds, and they're doing it. And you would have NHLers, like this was on a frequent comment in the mid 2000s, NHL goalies being like, yeah, I went to this goalie school this summer and like the kids moved better than me. Right. And so there are so many different ways to get to that. And yet there are so many goalies that do those things so well. And then they get into a game and they can't stop a puck. And that's part of what makes this so fascinating. Is the different formulas that go into success for everyone, and how, on ice drills are just like, we're just scratching the surface there. We know nowadays if you can't move, you can't play. Like you got to be able to skate. So that's a big one. But also the mental side of the game, and I know Joe gets into that with a lot of his clients, finding balance on and off the ice. We work with a couple different companies, Visual Edge for training your eyes. Like I remember Braden Holtby telling me, like my eyes are a muscle. Like I train my legs, I train my arm. Like my eyes are the most important muscle I have as a goaltender. And so why wouldn't I train those, right? And so you got companies like Visual Edge that train that. And then you got guys like Joey DeCord in Seattle that will literally put on a VR headset in an intermission of an NHL game if his glove feels off. And it's like, because we can't, right? As goalies, it's like, oh man, my glove doesn't feel good tonight. How do I get it better? He'll put on a virtual reality headset, hit the goalie cannon, and have it rip pucks at his virtual glove, and just to get that sensation. Other guys will do visualization to achieve that, right? Like there are just so many tools that are out there, and not every one is right for every goalie.
Right.
And again, that's what makes it so fascinating. This blend of. And that's what makes the great coaches good, like to recognize what tool's going to help what goalie, but then how to integrate it. Like I can spot technical deficiencies. Doesn't mean I know how to fix it. That's why a lot of people ask me, oh, why don't you coach? I'm like, because I can't. Because it's a really incredible skill that requires years of honing. It's one thing to see it. It's another thing to be able to work with this athlete to get them to do it right. I learned that the hard way, Joe. I don't know if I can't remember if you were there the year that Evgeny Nabokov decided, I whispered in his ear something I was seeing in a drill. It was with the junior kids, thankfully, not the NHLers.
Yeah.
And he said, well, why don't you go tell the kid? He said, you're right. Let's go tell the kid and see if he can fix it. I turned that kid so inside out that he couldn't stop a thing the rest of the day, right? Like being able to spot it and being able to coach it are
Yeah.
two different worlds. And Nabby was kind of like, he said to me after, he's like, you weren't wrong, but like this, how you deliver it and, maybe sometimes you got to leave it. Sometimes you got to leave it. Like you can spot this little thing that's costing them the odd goal here and there. But if fixing it is at the expense of a dozen goals, then you're not doing any good, right? So, there's so many tools to get back to your question, Gehrig. So many different things, so many different ways of viewing efficiency of movement, and all these elements. And I believe some are foundational and need to be a part of your game. But finding that right blend, it's like some guys say it's 7 different elements. Different coaches have different skill sets that they put into like the perfect goalie. And everyone, it's a sliding scale of where they are. And every mix is different. There are, what are there, 64 goalies in the National Hockey League. And despite the fact that laymen, like including NHL observers, will be like, they all play the same. The reality is none of them do.
Right. You're right.
I learned that specifically as a Bruins fan. I told you I started playing hockey later in life. I was 14, and timeline-wise, I was born in 95, so that puts me at 2010. So the first playoff series I was a fan of the Boston Bruins was the reverse sweep by the Flyers. So I remember thinking, God, like this is different than anything I've ever seen coming from baseball. A 3-0 sweep coming back from that. Never seen anything like that in my life. But the part about hockey that really gripped me the next year and made me transition to playing goalie was Tim Thomas. And at the same time that made me fall in love with the game, it kind of ruined the position of goalie for me, because ever since him, I've been trying to learn how you actually properly play, because he might be the most freestyle, crazy guy I have ever watched still to this day. And it's funny, you mentioned Joey Decord using VR. I love when this happens. That's the next part of my note, the next question I had for you. We talk about here all the time about drills and mentality. You talked about it a little bit. But even to things like Joey Decord using VR to train is a newer way of training. But every goalie trains a little differently. Last episode, we talked about what coach looks for when he's evaluating talent at every single level. You don't have to go through every single level, but just give me a couple keys or things that you can observe with a guy, either on or off the ice, that lets you know, oh, okay, this guy has one of those 5 or 7 tools you just talked about.
Well, I'll get the Tim Thomas example, right? Like it was, they called it the battle fly back then, not the butterfly, right? Like the way he competed. And yet when you got to talk to Tim, and he was so good to us at InGoal over the years, we even did like worked with him and coordinated. There was a Movember mustache mask that it was actually InGoal and his painter and him that we did a charity raffle. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so, and actually one of the professionally toughest days I've ever had was that 2011 Stanley Cup final, covering it for the Associated Press.
Sorry.
Well, that's the thing. This is why in my job, you can't get involved emotionally. I don't cheer for teams. I cheer for good stories and good people. And so to have to walk into that Vancouver Canucks room minutes after they lose Game 7 in the Stanley Cup final and ask questions of people I really admired, Roberto Luongo, Daniel and Henrik Sedin, as good of people as you will meet in the game, on this moment of heartbreak, one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But literally 5 minutes later, after getting those quotes, I'm on the ice asking Tim Thomas questions, right? Like, so getting to see those wild swings in emotion and how up until that point, how everybody manages them, that's a big part of it. So the ability to battle without sort of breaking structure to the point where you're out of control of your emotions, of your body. That's definitely one of them. And this has become a learning curve for me too. I like no stone unturned guys, and I will lean towards that. Young guys in their career, complacent, not willing to change. No thanks. The game evolves too much. Guys that are willing to try new things, even if they don't use them. Like, hey, man, tool in the toolbox means sometimes you try it and you're like, I'm not putting this in my toolbox. It's not going to help me. I've tried it. It doesn't work for me. But guys that are open, guys that are looking for new things, it's I think that when you look at Marc-Andre Fleury, for example, and the career he had, Roberto Luongo and the career he had, even Tim Thomas, like for all the talk about Battlefly, Tim will tell you that he added technical elements to his game, and that's one of the reasons he had success. It may not have looked like everyone else, but there was a technical foundation there, and it improved over time. Like he worked on that with Bob Essenza. So, Luongo adding the reverse VH because his body just didn't allow the VH to hold. Marc-Andre Fleury totally changed the way he played halfway through his career. My favorite one was Fleury in Chicago. So that stint he had in Chicago, he's already won a Vezina Trophy. He's got the Stanley Cups. And Kevin Lankinen, who's now the Vancouver Canucks goalie, was like a new to NHL Finnish veteran on the team, and he was using an overlap. And Flower had been pretty much predominantly reverse at that point in his career. And he also liked every once in a while to just do old school stand-up on the post. And so he saw Lankinen using the overlap, and he added it to his game, working with the goalie coach and working with Kevin. Like there's a guy that could have looked at this young
That's
kid
awesome.
playing next to him and been like, no thanks. But he's like, maybe this is a way I can not get caught in reverse all the time.
Yeah.
My old school stand up on the post, but take a step outside the post so I can do a butterfly, and I'm still fast enough to recover out of it. Like, there's a reason guys get to 1,000 games, and that willingness to always try new things. Now, quick caveat. There is a fine line between no stone unturned, willing to embrace new things and learning when to do it in your season.
Right.
And the guys that chase change for the sake of change. Because I've seen guys that I really loved because they were always looking for things. They'd ask me questions. I was like, I was kind of honored. Like, oh, that's really cool. But sometimes they never really established their foundation. They were always trying to chase the next change. And that can become problematic as a goalie as well, because you don't have something to anchor yourself in.
Fascinating. It's definitely something we've talked about on this podcast too, where the goalie comes with a unique mental position of where you have to have an ego. You have to believe you're better than a lot of people on the ice. I'm going to stop 31 of 33 shots tonight. Like, I have to be the best player on the ice. But there is also, like you're saying, a bit of humility where you have to be able to take, if you've let in 5 goals and you're having a tough stretch, then you need to change something maybe, or you need to change up something about your pregame routine, or the way you're mentally approaching whatever it may be. You need to be amenable if you're going to make it 10, 20 years like Flower and some of these guys you just mentioned.
Well, and Joe, you'd know this with Connor, right? Like, you were there in the Net 360 days. Like he wasn't who we know him to be now. The tools were all there. But, I know the work that Wade's done, and even some of the things that he learned at Net 360, like a willingness to add them.
Yeah, and he's always been open to that. But I think a big key is, as a goalie coach, as a goalie, who you're surrounded by, who your inner circle is. Because sometimes I've seen goaltenders have way too many people giving them their opinions and this and that. And it's okay to listen, but you got to have a very small inner circle. And Helly has been blessed with a guy like Wade Flaherty, great temperament, willing to listen. And when I work with younger goalies, I work with more teenager, 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds. And what we do, and I know that Wade and Helly do the same thing, is they'll watch video and they'll break something down, or we'll get on the ice and we'll break something down. I said, okay, these are your options, and you got to figure out what's going to work for you. And, no two situations are identical. So it's life in a pinball machine. And like I always say, good luck with that, right? It's very difficult. But I think you have to have, as a goalie, the mental fortitude to believe in exactly what you're doing. It's kind of like a golf swing. Know your swing, so when it kind of goes off center a little bit, you can fix it. But understand it, but you have to be able to deal with failure. Because you're going to fail. You're going to give up goals, and failure is giving up goals. And sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. But dealing mentally with failure and handling it the right way is everything. And the ones that I think, and this is my belief, you get to the NHL level where they're all incredibly gifted athletes, but there's a level of elite guys, super elite, and then solid. All right. And I think the thing that differentiates them all is the mental part of it. I really do. And some of them are great athletes, but you know what? They're good 1 year and then bad for 2, or average for 2. And then, they may resurrect a little bit down the road, but being consistent year after year after year, Vasilevsky, Hellebuck, guys like that, Marc-Andre Fleury. There's a lot that goes into that. You want a good team or a bad team, a weak team or a strong team. So there's so much that goes into it. But I think the thing that will separate the elite from the super elite is the mental game and how you deal with failure.
We use golf as an analogy a lot because golf is just a game of mistake management, and that's essentially what you're doing as the solo player on the ice protecting your net. I got one last question.
We do that all the time too. Sorry to jump in on the golf,
No,
not just because I want to mention again that Joe hits driver off the deck like nobody I've ever seen, but also like the similarities there are, we talk about that a lot at Ingoal. Like you're sort of on your own. It's like the first tee thing, right? There are so many elements that are the same. You can't try harder. Like that doesn't work as a goaltender. You got to let the game come to you. You can't, like, when's the last time you got to the first tee and we're like, I'm going to swing really hard and that worked out well for you? Like you can't try harder. The whole one shot at a time thing, right? Like next shot, like it's all about the next shot. Easiest. And every goalie will tell you this. Every golfer will tell you this. So easy to say that. Sometimes it's really hard to do. And then the way we break down a golf swing and the way we break down the biomechanics of a goalie moving around the ice now, like video and the nth degree, right or wrong, there's also similarities there between the two sports for sure. So we use that. I like the golf and goaltending analogy a lot. I think there is a lot you can learn. It's probably also not a coincidence I suck at both.
Yeah, well, golf is a nightmare. That's why there's no breakfast ball in the first period, The first hole usually, I will take one every once in a while. I will take a hack at the first hole. I had one more question before I let you guys, Coach Clark, ask some questions. I was doing some research before, and I was reading through Pro Reads, I believe is a section or a piece you do every once in a while where you really, really break down an individual save or a couple individual saves. And I was looking at one from Hellebuck against the Flames and just reading through the breakdown. If you're a young goalie out there, these pro reads are phenomenal. They are phenomenal breakdowns of individual saves that talk about each and every individual inch of that play.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. It is one of our sort of, well, it is our basically premier piece of content. And there's a new one every week. And I think the key is for people that aren't familiar, that are hearing this for the first time, it's not me breaking it down. It's the NHL goalie breaking it down. And from Thatcher
I'll give
Demko,
some examples from the article I read because they are, like he's saying, they are from professionals all over the spectrum of hockey. So it's fascinating to read them, even if you're
and it's basically a video. You basically are sitting in on what a video session would look like between an NHL goalie and his goalie coach.
Yep.
And I had the idea, there used to be a magazine called Goalies World. And Goalies World used to run basically, it's like somebody took a camera shutter and just left it going. It was like freeze frames of a play moving around the zone so you could see how the goalie reacted to it. And when Goalies World stopped running, we're like, oh, we need to find something to do that. And so with In Goal Mag being all online based, we have the ability to run video. And so it's basically me doing a Zoom with Connor Hellebuck reviewing video, me sitting down with Thatcher Demko for an hour, Dustin Wolf going over video, and they explain why they chose this depth, why they choose this save selection, what elements they're looking for when the puck's on the perimeter, handedness, how their defense is going to play it, and how all those different factors that we have to deal with as goaltenders, like 10 guys moving around the ice, 5 of them trying to take away your sight line, sadly some of your own guys often doing it by accident, and 5 of them trying to find a way to put that puck behind you. How do you read the game? And we talked before about, I hate the term goalie school goalies, but those you can do the technique and do it, but you don't get any reps in games. So how do you learn the other stuff? How do you learn, when you should back off on a 2-on-1 versus when you should take ice? Do you play with flow? All these different elements. We have the best in the world breaking. There's over 3. So if you get a subscription to us, not shameless plug, you get all the archives. There's over 350 of these sitting there right now that you can just watch one after another and learn how the best in the game break down the game, read the game, process the game so that you can do a better job of it as a young goalie. There's nothing else like it. There never has been. And it's something we take a lot of pride in delivering.
Yeah. It's one of my absolutely. It's the crown jewel of In Goal magazine. It really is. And we do. I've got clients. I've got 10 or 12 clients, and I get subscriptions for all of them to In Goal magazine, and it's a very inexpensive gift for them. But they can learn. I mean, they learn from me, of course, but they can learn. You want to be able to learn from everybody, but I think it's absolutely priceless.
Yeah, there are parts of reading the first couple paragraphs before you have the video example of what the shot or play is that we're discussing, and it really, really sets it in for you when you read from Helly or from his goalie coach what the thought process is for this 11 seconds. Where if you're not familiar with how hockey moves at the professional level, you're like, there's absolutely no way he is having all these thoughts, and it's because this guy's done this so much that most of that is unconscious for him now.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one we did, we didn't know if we had something here. We're like, hey, like this is my idea. Let's see if it works. The first one we did, and I when we started this, like I'm still 20 years in at that point covering the game, and I think I know what NHL goalies are looking for. The first one we did was Carey Price, and Carey just stood there and started breaking down video, and like there are like mushroom clouds going, like my head was exploding with, I could not believe the detail. And for some of these guys, like, and Carey was one of them, like, you know, a little more active in there, as much as we think of him as this smooth, silky, technically sound goaltender. Like, you know, he'd take ice and bait you a little bit. Like he'd load up what's almost like a VH off the rush and build a wall on one side with his glove up and that leg loaded in case the 2-on-1 went the other way. He'd just make that big push across. Like he did things a little bit different, and hearing him explain in real time why he was doing it was just like, oh my goodness, this is gold. And we basically kept going from there. The one thing I would say too for young goalies, and Joe, you know this as well, you probably do it a lot in your video sessions, it's not just enough to know your game and to learn how to read off the opponents.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the things that's really resonated with me that I did not expect. How much of these guys' decision-making is based off knowing what their defensemen are supposed to do and trusting them to do it. So if you're a young goalie out there and you think that, you know, when the coach is talking systems on the chalkboard ahead of a drill, you can just tune out. Like you really need to understand what your guys, where they're positioned, what they're trying to do, where the pressure points are on the ice, where they're going to try and take away space, how that affects how you have to play off of it. It's such a massive part of the game. You can't just worry about what hand the other guy is. Trusting and knowing where your defenders are supposed to be and whether they're going to be there, frankly, after a while is massive.
Yeah, you have to be able to read like a situation, like the game at the top of the circles down is basically 3-on-3, right? So 3 1-on-1s, depending on the system you're playing. But if one of the D gets beat from a wall or someone falls down, all of a sudden it's odd man, right? And now you got to play it as an odd man, as a goalie. And defensemen are going to give you or expect you to handle the bad angle shot, and they're going to protect the slot, anchor the slot, as we say. But those reads are really, really important. And you're exactly right. The goalies. I remember I was doing an interview. I was interviewing actually for a goaltending coach job in Carolina. And the guy that was interviewing me asked me this question. I thought it was the dumbest question of all time. But he said, should goalies be in PK meetings? Yeah. You know, I was shocked he'd even ask that. But I guess he's going to ask what he's going to ask. But you have to know, you got to know where people are expected to be. And but you also have to have the ability to read breakdowns. And when it all fails, you got to know where you want to be.
Well, and at that level, I'm like, I don't know. Obviously, this coach didn't subscribe to that if they didn't think, and not sure. Maybe they agreed or disagreed whether they should be. But like I remember Andre Tournier, who's now the Utah head coach, when he was in Colorado, we did a Zoom with him in Hockey Canada, and my first part, like it was him and a couple of goalies, and I'm privately messaging the person that organized it. I'm like, why do we have a head coach and a goalie Zoom? Like, what are we doing here? But he understood goaltending, and he's incorporated that into his systems and made it friendly for goaltenders. He talked about in Colorado when Patrick Waugh was the coach and the goalies were Semyon Varlamov and Jean-Sébastien Giguère, they would change their PK structure depending on which guy was starting that night, because obviously Jiggy was a little more, by that point in his career, a little less mobile, a little more just like give him the open release, and Varley had a lot more sort of lateral mobility to his game. And so they would change, like, hey, like every team's, especially on the PK, you're going to give something up.
Yeah.
But understanding what your team is willing to give up so that you can know you can trust it. So when that open look is there, it's like, okay, I can lock in on this because I know they've got the flanks. I know they've got the back door. That's why they're giving me this. Like, you need to understand systems. You really do, as a goaltender, need just to understand your own team's system as well as what opponents are trying to do to you.
100%.
It's absolutely something as a Bruins fan that has been noticeable over the last decade, from quote unquote reviving Linus Ullmark's career, when in reality we had a lot better guys on the blue line who were much more responsible on that end of the ice. And it shows now. It's not that Jeremy Swayman has had this drop off in talent. It's that the team is different in front of him. The systems are different, and there's a new coach, and there's a lot of different factors that add into not just your goalie coach and the way you play goalie.
Yeah, I always say, well, I mean, and in Boston's case, anytime you lose, when you lose Patrice Bergeron and that defensive mindset as the core of your identity, eventually, like the Kings are going to face it next year when Kopitar goes, right? You can coach it all you want, but you need to have your leadership buy into it, especially leadership amongst your forwards. I always say, this is my line for this one when I do like radio or whatever: goaltending it does not exist in a vacuum. It is a function of team play. And so one of the things that has been massive for me when we talk about evaluating, and I tend to try and get away from evaluation because I'm trying to build relationships with these guys, not a reputation for critiquing them, but Clearsight Analytics. We actually just had Stephen Valakat on our podcast as well over at Ingle, and he runs Clearsight Analytics, former NHL goaltender, current Rangers analyst, also coaches. And to sort of understand, like, we all know as goalies that some chances are inevitably way more dangerous than others. Like, it's common sense. But for the longest time, the analytics world tried to tell us there was no such thing as shot quality, and it could all be measured just on volume. And it used to drive me nuts, and I used to have arguments over it, and I used to get hammered for it. But now we have proof, like, shot quality matters significantly. And so being able to measure environment and measure a goalie's performance relative to environment is so key. And where I struggle is I only have access to those numbers at the NHL level. And I watch these kids in junior, and they're being evaluated based on raw numbers, and then I watch them play, and I'm like, this kid can play.
Yeah.
Why are you all ignoring him because he's got a goals against average of 4, but they're giving up 40 shots a night, and 25 of them are high danger? Like, like, you watch these kids and you're like, nobody can see it. Like, in the NHL, which is covered at a level no other league is covered, there are quite often times nobody can see it. I'll see the numbers and I'll be like, I'll give you an example. UC Saros last year. I had people ripping on UC Saros halfway through the year, and I literally had to put my hand up on my shows, and I'd be like, do you know that UC Saros should be a Vezina candidate?
I live in Nashville right now. It was one of the most frustrating narratives all of last year. The reason that team was bad was because of it. Absolutely not.
Yeah, and so especially for the first half of the year. Like, he literally was one of the best goalies in the NHL through the end of November, December.
The only reason they stayed afloat at all at the beginning of that year.
Exactly. And so I had people going, what's wrong with UC Saros? And I'm like, nothing. They're wasting a brilliant goaltending quarter of it, or third of a season here. And eventually, and this is the other part of it, eventually his numbers did fall off. Because eventually, I believe a bad environment defensively becomes cumulative. Yeah, and this is an exaggeration, but it used to be the Edmonton example before we had these numbers, and they were doing things like running Devin Dubnyk out of town and then watching him succeed elsewhere. But and this is an oversimplification, but if you know that your defenseman's supposed to have the back door on an odd man rush or a guy walking off the wall, and so you square up on the shooter, and that pass gets through 8 straight times, on the 9th time or the 10th time, or actually probably on the 4th time, you're gonna cheat to that pass.
Yeah.
And in this league, as soon as you cheat, they see you lean. They're putting it by your ear, short side, right? Yeah. So, like, goaltending does not exist in a vacuum. Thankfully, at the NHL level, we have tools that allow us to measure it, and I'm lucky to be able to access proprietary ones that teams pay a lot of money to access. At the lower levels, we don't have that. We don't. And a lot of the stuff that's out there, I got to be careful because I have a relationship with ClearSight, so there's a bias, but it's junk. Like some of the stuff that is using like video cameras and AI to break it down, like even at the NHL level, there is a company that a lot of NHL teams use, and it's not, forget the math, forget its calculations, because there are brilliant people doing it. But it's much like the public data, garbage in, garbage out. And they actually measure the events on the ice with like a 73% accuracy. Like that gets you a C+ in high school, and we've got billion-dollar organizations relying on it like it's Bible.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I have a little frustration with that, and I think I love the tool to be able to see at the NHL level. My heart breaks for the kids at the lower levels that don't have anybody educated enough to figure out that it's not them, and have people look at the numbers and not be willing to look past it and truly evaluate it.
Yeah, you've got to be able to pass the eye test with junior age or even AAA. Like I work with a AAA program in Lincoln, Nebraska, Kevin, and the coach is Curtis Brown, who played a long time in the NHL, San Jose, and
I was going to say, I think I covered him in the San Jose years.
Yeah. And so Curtis is the head coach, and he and I bumped into each other a couple of summers ago, and we've since teamed up. But we've been able to have goaltenders that have moved up and on into the junior ranks, and we don't give a rat's ass about stats, because there is the defensive play is so bad. Some of these guys they're learning the game, whether it's forward missing as a guy coming home, or defensive or D-man just poorly playing a 2-on-1 and not anchoring the slot. We, as goalies, we don't even care about stats. You're going to give up. You're going to give up whatever amount of goals you're going to give up, but let's just work on your game, work on these situations, and don't worry about numbers. So I think we're doing a pretty good job of training them that way, but it's tough to sell to junior levels when a guy's goals against is 4.01 and his save percentage is, 904, not what you want. But you know what? He's a really good goalie. So under a different circumstance, a really good structure, he's going to excel. Hard to sell that. It really is. So in my world, if I'm going to go back to scouting in the National League and I'm going to watch goalies, I don't give a rat's ass about numbers. I really don't. I care about what my gut tells me or what I see for myself, because I've been very blessed to been around guys like you and NHL goalies for a while, and I know what I see. But I think the eye test is kind of a forgotten deal, and too much. I get the analytics. I understand why they're there, but I think too much emphasis sometimes is put on that to judge whether a goalie can play or not.
Well, I think it's all a matter of having the right analytics, right? Like, and even at the NHL level, there are guys, I'm not going to name names and organizations, where they will make really bad decisions on goalies and goalie acquisitions and goalie decisions on contracts. And I look at the numbers and I'm like, this is a bad choice.
Yeah.
And sometimes like we can get to the point where it's like, hey, like this guy's decent, but he really struggles in this one area. Oh, and by the way, your team that just signed him to this big extension or whatever, you happen to be giving up a ton of those.
Yeah.
Right. Or vice versa. This guy has an area of weakness. The previous team, I understood that and never let it get exposed. New team signs him because, he's a good goalie there, he'll be a good goalie here. Doesn't understand those underlying factors, and all of a sudden they try and like either change him or just expect him to stop these shots. It's like, well, he never did before. Why do you expect him to do it now? Like we're talking about like tens of millions of dollars handed out without an actual understanding, and it's a little frustrating to me, obviously, because I'm biased towards goaltenders, but also like we started this conversation. I didn't start till I was 35. I've been doing this for less than 20 years. Like, and we always hear coaches and GMs say, "Oh, like I don't understand goaltending. I leave it to somebody else." Like, why not?
Yeah.
Like, why? Like, if I can learn as a journalist, like, and get to this point into, like, pretty sure you can figure out some of the rudimentary stuff. There's a lot of information out there. Just do the work.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen so many coaches. Oh, not a billion coaches. You know, I've worked with head coaches now in the National League who knew everything there is to know about the game. Unbelievable coaches, strategy wise, tactical wise, training wise, but they didn't get goaltending because they never played. It was like you know, the ultimate kryptonite. You know, goalies can be kryptonite to some coaches, and it really it frustrates them to no end to not understand. So there's no rule that says you can't learn. You know, and I'll bring up Jim Montgomery, the guy I worked with at Denver, right? And he was in that category. Just couldn't stand goalies because I believe because he didn't understand it. Brutal on him. I mean, really, really tough on him, which at some point I can understand. But I think when he got to the National League, he was surrounded by pretty good goalie people in Boston, Dallas, Boston, and now St. Louis. But there's always room to learn a little bit more than what you know, especially with head coaches. But I've seen that where head coaches are making decisions and GMs making decisions, the same thing, about where to spend money and on goalies. And I've seen it just like you have, Kevin. It's kind of mind-boggling.
Agree.
It's pretty remarkable. I remember getting into hockey and hearing about goalies were the weird position. Nobody really talked to goalies. They do their own thing. They have their own, and that's kind of, I think, started to melt away a little bit with conversations like the one we're having right now, where it's fascinating what these guys have to go through. And like we were talking about with your pro reads breakdowns, like every single millisecond there are unconscious decisions that these guys have to filter through. And you played baseball growing up, Kevin, so you'll get a little bit of, we've also used the pitcher as a comparison for sort of that relationship with the middle infielders. You know, you don't have constant conversations, but you have little things throughout the game that say, hey, I'm coming to you here, or you have this side on this weak side shot. You know, little conversations that are the game within the game that I personally love and find fascinating.
Oh, middle infielder, right? Like, it's all about just like goalies have to be able to anticipate, you know, and Connor Hellebuck's the best in the world at this, right? Read pucks off sticks. You had to know, you know, what's like where that first move is, where that first jump is. And a lot of it was just instinct. You saw the way the swing was coming. But it's like the systems. If you understood where they were trying to pitch the guy, you understood what type of hitter he was, you knew what the likelihood was of it being pulled or hit to the opposite field. And back in my day, guys actually tried to hit above 300 and use the opposite field. Now it's all about the long ball and 250 batting averages. It kills me. But you had to know how to get that jump. Like I wasn't a blessed athlete, but I got to a certain level because I was already moving. Like that puck wasn't off the stick. That ball was not off the bat. And I already had my first step. Like you had to have that anticipation, and it wasn't guessing. It was knowing all that information. And so as a goalie, if you're just showing up and relying off a puck off stick, as much as you can work on reading that, man, you're selling yourself short in terms of not understanding systems, not spending time looking at the other team. Like the trends of the game will help inform you to become better in your reactions and your reads and your anticipation.
I had a question for you, Kevin. Of all the guests that you've had, now this is referring to your reads, right? Your pro reads. Do you have a favorite one or two guys that are just unbelievable at it?
They're all pretty good in their own way. I honestly, like, this isn't just because you're asking, Joe, but I think Helly might be one of my favorites because so much of what he does is read based. You know, and there was a great story his dad told recently I think it was 2 years ago on a radio show after the second Vezina in Winnipeg that we heard and just loved it. Let's talk about going into, you know, the sports store.
Yeah.
And you guys have probably heard this story, but his dad's going into the sports store and he doesn't go to the goalie equipment. He goes to the player's stick rack and he's looking at the curves and like, hey, if I can figure out who has what curve and how it's going to come off, like that's going to make me better. We used to say this of Dominic Hasek.
That's why people think goalies are weirdos, by the way. That's a crazy person.
He was 10 years old, I
best
think.
in the world, but
But that's what it takes to study the game, right? To really want to.
That's
Hasek,
nuts.
we used to say with Hasek, he had a mind like a computer and a body like a slinky. And in my mind, he's the best. Like what he did, the way he did it, the uniqueness, like it's just, I mean, all the Hart trophies. I think Helly has the Hasek level mind like a computer. Now he uses his body in a different way. He's not going to contort it. It's about efficiency in that matter. But the way he reads the game, and so that was, Carey was the mushroom clouds going off in part because he was first, and in part because he was brilliant. But Helly, like, we did video and it gets over, like the puck is just over the blue line, and not only is he telling me that the guy's whether he's shooting or passing. But if he's shooting, he's telling me where.
Yeah.
I'm like, hold on. Like the puck just entered the zone. Like he's not going to shoot till it gets to the dot. And you're telling me where already? And like, honestly, he hasn't seen the whole clip. And maybe he's, maybe he's a guy like Doobie who remembers all these plays. Like it's unbelievable that, like
Hockey
they never
guys
forget.
Have crazy memory. I've come to understand.
Yeah.
It's nuts. But again, the way he anticipates. Now, again, it's a fine line. We have other guys. We did Dustin Wolf. We sat down for an hour. And it was fascinating to me because as much as he's paying attention to all those details, and they will inform some decisions on depth and route across the crease on lateral plays, like which path does he take, which route. His isn't less about reading what the other team's going to do and more just absolutely believing in his foundation to get him there, get him set, get him square, to beat every play on his feet.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and so there's your pendulum, right? Like guys that rely more on one than the other, like that wild swing. There's no one way to play this position, which is what I love about it. Thatcher Demko talking about post play and a lot of elements. Like he was brilliant in the hour he spent with us, and we've got like 9 with him. So every guy brings a different thing, and that's the other like last point I'll make on pro reads. I have guys that are my favorites, but just like everything we talked about, like tools in the toolbox. Just because a certain guy played it that way doesn't mean you have to.
Right.
Yaroslav Halak, who had never should have been allowed to walk away from the NHL when he did. He had top 10 adjusted numbers with the Rangers that year. He used to use paddle down to expand his high coverage on lateral plays. And I'm like, huh?
That doesn't make sense. Yeah.
But he used the paddle down as he was moving to protect the 5-hole, and he used it to anchor, and like it wasn't a passive paddle down. Like he drove that thing and kept the straight arm to help him rotate and keep the shoulders high. Like he used paddle down to keep his shoulders up as a leverage point while moving laterally, rather than allow himself to get into a spread where he only had the pads along the ice and the glove above the pad, and you've got the bottom taken away but not the top. He would drive that paddle down as he was spreading to keep his shoulders and his chest higher and give him more coverage. Little things like that aren't necessarily going to be for everyone, but again, try it. Tools in the toolbox.
That might be the thing that figures it out for you. That's so. Am I really about to hop off and watch Yaroslav Halak highlights? That's so funny. I've never noticed that. That's so cool.
Yeah, and the first time he told me, again, like more mushroom clouds, I'm like, and that's the beauty. Like, I think, I was however many years into it, however many pro reads we've done, and Yarrow sits down and tells me this, and I'm like, think like of all the reps, of all the conversations, I'd never thought of that.
Yeah.
Like, that didn't cross my mind. Yeah, it just, he went paddle down to protect the 5-hole because he was open up going across, and then you see how much rotation he gets with his shoulders, how high his shoulders stay on a lateral spread, and you're like, yeah.
These younger guys
probably, jam my finger and break it off because I didn't have a trigger grip, but it was brilliant, right?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. There's no one way to do this. I know I've said that a few times, but
a lot of it's instincts, and everyone has different instincts, and that's another beautiful part of the game. And I try to get to these teenage goalies about how to use your own instincts, how to trust your own instincts, because you're going to fail. But you know what? Look at the video and say, okay, how would I do this over again? If I was going to have the same situation, how would I play it? But yeah, I think a goalie's instincts are everyone's unique, but everything comes down to that. How you read plays coming through the neutral zone, and it's very hard for young guys to do. But as you get older, you understand how it works.
And don't feel like everything has to be a perfect save, even if you read it perfectly, right? Like Hasek, we all know the barrel roll save,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like we all think of it as just this like mad scientist, like he's just like, again, body like a slinky, sliding all over the place. I had the pleasure of talking to Dom about that save selection, and it's actually very methodical and well thought out. And I'm sure at some point, and Ian Clark uses this as one of his 7 things, the creativity, the ability to compete and be creative and come up with unique solutions in complex environments. Like sometimes you got to drop your stick and go for a barrel roll.
Yeah.
Well, for Dom, it was a very specific situation, cutting across the crease to his blocker's side on their forehand.
Yeah.
Stick out the blocker.
Yep.
Because that forces the guy to pull his hand, to extend his hands to keep the puck away.
Right.
And what happens? What do we know happens to a shooter when he has to extend his hands? He can't elevate.
Right.
He has to pull that puck back in to be able to tuck high. So he extends with the blocker, and now that shooter's going around him. So what's the fastest way to cover the bottom of the ice? He rolls over with his other arm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, now he's got the bottom of the net taken away, and now the legs swing up. And think about that picture of Dom halfway through that barrel roll with the legs sticking straight up in the air and the arms along the ice. What is it?
Yeah.
And this is what he told me. It's a reverse butterfly.
Yeah.
Like he's literally creating a butterfly out of a barrel roll, and that's how Dom thought the game.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying everybody has to be Hasek, but like look for those moments that, like, be inspired to try different things.
Yep.
And you know what? Some of them will work, and some of them, when they work, will be repeatable. And you may be the one that comes up with the next barrel roll save, right? Like there was a method to the madness.
Yeah.
And once you understand that, once you're willing to think in those terms, maybe you can be great.
Well,
that was no accident.
Yeah, I think some of this comes down to just having some fun with it and experimenting a little bit. And don't be afraid to put yourself in that situation. Have a little fun. And some guys are so tight. They want to be, robotic and all that. And I hate that. I just can't stand that. But you got to live a little, you got to take some chances. You got to gamble. Everything you do, and there is a gamble anyway. All right.
The guy who I think of when you say have a little fun has been the longest standing goalie in my lifetime, Marc-Andre Fleury. So I think he has the most fun of any goalie, and that's what's allowed him to stay around and keep fresh. And like you said, Kevin, reinvent himself every few years.
Yeah, and probably the most beloved goalie in the league.
We've got lots of articles at Ingle on Flower over the years talking about the importance of fun, how that came from his dad when he was first year junior, like, and away from home and all the pressures that come with it. And his dad just said, like, if you're not having fun, like, don't bother. But if you're still having fun, stay. And the way he competes on pucks in practice, Lundqvist was the same, man. They'd be like, practices I never expected him to attend. They'd play the night before in Edmonton and show up and have an optional practice the next day in Vancouver. And Lundqvist is out there, not just out there, but he's out there competing, asking for breakaways, battling on every shot. Flower was the same way. He had fun doing it. Flower's the last goalie in the NHL, the only goalie that I know of that played last puck, even on games that he was starting. That's normally just for the backup.
Yeah, right.
He wanted to get his sweat going. He wanted to have fun.
A little fun.
There's a great lesson there, Joe, and you're right about having fun.
That's awesome. You got anything else, Coach?
I'm good. This has been awesome, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. It's been over an hour now, but this was awesome, man. I really hope that you had fun, because I did. I know I did. And we'll hopefully have you back on at some point to talk more about it.
Yeah. Had an absolute blast, guys. I really appreciate you having me. This is people think I have a couple radio contracts. We're doing a couple different markets every once in a while, and they think it's because I know goaltending. The truth is, it's because the host only have to ask me 2 questions and we get through a 20-minute segment. So you guys have now learned that the hard way, a full hour.
That's great. We love it.
Right
we
on.
love it. And good luck to your Mariners. All right.
Oh, please. Yes, and thank you.
All right.
Well,
Kevin, good seeing you, buddy.
Good to see you too, Joe. All the best, guys, with this new venture.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.